Imagine a world where the most valuable resource on Earth, gold, was traded without a single word spoken. No haggling, no shouting, not even eye contact. Caravans would cross the endless Sahara, lay their goods on the ground, beat a drum, and then vanish into the distance. Hours later, strangers would appear, leave behind dusts of gold, and disappear again. No words exchanged, yet both sides walked away satisfied. How could such a system possibly work? And why has this forgotten trade, one that made West Africa rich beyond imagination, almost vanished from history books? This mysterious practice was known as the silent trade, an exchange system that flourished for centuries between the merchants of North Africa and the gold-rich kingdoms of West Africa, most famously the Empire of Ghana. At a time when salt was as precious as gold, Berber and Arab traders carried their caravans across the Sahara, while West African traders offered the one thing the world craved most: gold. Yet unlike any trade you can imagine today, this exchange happened in total silence. No deals shouted in markets, no interpreters to bridge languages, just trust, ritual, and the beating of drums in the desert air. And yet, this fascinating system is rarely told. Overshadowed by the brutal history of the transatlantic slave trade and European colonization, the story of Africa's silent exchange has been left on the margins of history. But it was this very system that helped shape one of the richest and most powerful empires of its time. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how the silent trade worked, why it thrived, and how it helped build West Africa into a center of wealth and influence long before the arrival of Europeans. To understand the silent trade, we need to begin with the rise of one of Africa's earliest great powers, the Kingdom of Ghana. Emerging around the 6th century and lasting until the 13th, Ghana was not located in the modern country of the same name, but in present-day Mauritania and Mali. It controlled the crossroads of the Sahara, where desert trade routes met the rich forests and rivers of West Africa. Beneath its soil lay one of the most coveted treasures of the medieval world: gold. The rulers of Ghana controlled vast gold fields, particularly in the Bambouk and Wangara regions. At a time when Europe struggled with limited access to precious metals, the gold of West Africa flowed north, fueling economies, minting coins, and financing empires across the Mediterranean and beyond. But gold was only one half of the story. The people of Ghana needed something just as valuable: salt. In a hot climate, salt was more than seasoning. It was essential for preserving food, maintaining health, and sustaining life itself. From the great salt mines of Taghaza and the Sahara, caravans of Berber and Arab traders carried enormous slabs of salt, along with fine cloth, copper, and horses, across the desert. What awaited them in the south was the golden heart of Africa's wealth. It was here, at this meeting point of needs, salt for gold, north for south, that one of history's most unusual systems of exchange came into being. So, how exactly did this silent trade unfold? Accounts from Arab chroniclers like al-Bakri paint a vivid picture of an exchange unlike any other in the medieval world. Caravans of North African traders, Berbers and Arabs, would journey across the Sahara, bringing with them salt, copper, textiles, and sometimes even horses. When they reached the designated trading grounds, often near the Niger River, they carefully laid out their goods on the sand or on stone platforms. Once everything was placed, the traders would beat drums or sound horns to announce their arrival. Then, without saying a word, they retreated a safe distance away, vanishing out of sight but remaining close enough to watch. After some time, the gold traders of West Africa would appear. They examined the goods left on the ground, then sprinkled small piles of gold dust beside the items they wished to purchase. Without a single word spoken, they too retreated into the distance, leaving their offer behind. The North Africans would return. If they were satisfied with the amount of gold dust, they collected it and departed, leaving their goods behind. But if they felt the offer was too small, they left everything as it was and stepped back again. The silent negotiation continued, more gold dust added, more waiting, until both sides reached an unspoken agreement. No bargaining, no translators, no risk of insult or deception, just trust, patience, and ritual. In this way, tons of gold and salt changed hands in silence for centuries. But why trade in silence? Why go through such a strange and careful ritual instead of simply speaking? Historians have suggested several possible reasons. each one adding to the mystery of the silent exchange. The first explanation is language. The Berber and Arab traders of North Africa spoke Arabic and Berber dialects, while the West Africans used Soninka, Mande, and other local tongues. Without a shared language, negotiations could easily break down, leading to confusion or mistrust. Silence solved the problem. Gold dust spoke for itself. The second reason was security. Trade across the desert was dangerous. Caravans carried wealth, and mistrust could spark violence. By never meeting face to face, the traders reduced the risk of cheating, robbery, or betrayal. The ritual created a buffer, a space where trust was built without direct confrontation. And finally, there may have been something deeper at work. Some historians suggest the silent trade carried a ritual or sacred meaning, turning commerce into ceremony. The beating of drums, the careful retreat, the slow back and forth. It feels less like a marketplace and more like a performance, one that bound both sides to an unspoken code of honor. To this day, scholars debate whether the silent trade was purely practical or partly ceremonial, but perhaps that is what makes it so fascinating. It was not just about gold and salt, it was about trust, ritual, and the invisible bonds that connected cultures across the desert. The silent trade was more than just an unusual custom. It was the foundation of an empire's power. By controlling the flow of gold and salt, the Kingdom of Ghana grew into one of the wealthiest states in Africa between the 8th and 11th centuries. The kings of Ghana did not simply allow trade to happen freely. They controlled it, taxing every caravan that entered and left their lands. Traders paid a duty on salt when it came into the kingdom and another when it left. Gold was even more tightly regulated. The king kept nuggets for himself, allowing only gold dust to circulate in trade. This ensured both wealth and control remained in royal hands. The result was astonishing prosperity. With this wealth, Ghana's rulers funded powerful armies of horsemen and archers who protected the trade routes and expanded the empire's reach. They built cities such as Kumbi Sala, which Arab chroniclers described as a bustling capital with markets full of goods and a royal court glittering with gold. The 11th century geographer al-Bakri wrote of Ghana with awe, describing a king who commanded immense riches, with dogs wearing collars of gold and guards armed with weapons imported through this very trade. To outsiders, Ghana seemed like a land of almost mythical wealth, and it was the silent exchange that made it possible. In short, the silent trade was not just an economic curiosity. It was the engine that transformed Ghana into a political and military power and a beacon of wealth in the medieval world. But even the wealth of Ghana could not last forever. By the late 11th century, the empire began to weaken. Waves of Berber invasions from the north disrupted trade, while new powers rose to challenge Ghana's dominance. Most notably, the Mali Empire emerged in the 13th century, seizing control of the gold fields and the trade routes that had once belonged to Ghana. At the same time, the silent trade itself began to fade. As cultures mixed and languages spread through the Sahara, merchants relied less on ritual silence and more on direct bargaining. The system that had once ensured trust gave way to more familiar methods of negotiation, and yet the silent trade left behind a powerful legacy. It was living proof that long before colonialism, African societies created sophisticated systems of commerce built on trust, innovation, and respect for boundaries. It showed that wealth could be exchanged across vast distances without war or conquest, and that empires could rise not only on armies, but on trade, ritual, and ingenuity. Though the silent trade is often forgotten in mainstream history, its memory reminds us that Africa was never isolated or primitive. It was connected, inventive, and central to the story of global commerce. So why have so few people heard of the silent trade? The truth is, much of Africa's pre-colonial history has been overshadowed. When we think of Africa's past, the dominant narratives often focus on the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade or the violence of European colonization. These were undeniably massive turning points, but they have also drowned out the stories that came before, stories of thriving kingdoms, innovation, and prosperity. The silent trade is rarely mentioned in school books because it does not fit the familiar image of Africa as a continent defined only by conflict and exploitation. Instead, it reveals a different truth, that African societies built systems of commerce so unique and so effective, they rivaled the trade networks of Europe and Asia. It is a chapter of history that challenges stereotypes, and that is precisely why it deserves to be remembered. The silent trade of West Africa reminds us that history is more than just wars and conquest. It is also about ingenuity, trust, and human connection, even without words. Long before colonialism and the slave trade, Africa was a land of innovation, where empires rose not only through power, but through the delicate balance of trade and ritual. And while this story may have been forgotten by many, it continues to echo through time, proof that history is full of hidden chapters waiting to be uncovered. If you want more stories like this, stories of forgotten history, untold innovation, and the mysteries that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves history as much as you do. Together, we can bring the past back to life.